So I'll go down the row here. And so what's it like when you're in a restaurant and you take that first bite of food and that server goes, so how is it? It's always the way things work. So Rick, why don't you go ahead and kick us off, kind of a little bit about what you do and where you've been.
Thank you, Rob. My name is Rick Oknick. I am a advisor with Banner Year Advisors. We are an organization that focuses on restaurant and hospitality consulting. I am a 25-year veteran of the restaurant industry. It's all I've ever done. It's all I've ever wanted to do. And I know how to do it really well. I grew up in a small town in Minnesota called Center City, and we had two restaurants. We had a Swedish cafe that filled up during Sunday church service, post-Sunday church service, a lot of Lutheran Swedes. And we had a bar. And those were my first two jobs at 11 and 12 years old, was washing dishes and waiting tables in the cafe and being a prep cook in the bar. And from there, I've always enjoyed the energy and the buzz and the excitement of being in a restaurant, all of the moving bodies and the precise execution that it takes. All the way through college, I was working in restaurants, and I always thought that I was working in the industry to reach the next thing and to just, paying the bills, getting through school. And then at a point it hit me that I could have a future in this industry, taking all of my experience and leveraging that. And that's when I got into management, and I took a management track in restaurants, and I was a manager, general manager. I got into a lot of event planning, director of operations for a few companies, and here I am now in front of you as now a restaurant consultant. So what Banner Year does is we really focus on providing our clients, restaurant owners and operators, with fundamental tools that are sometimes missing. We provide them with financial tools and knowledge. We show them how to build a budget, which some of you may be surprised, and it may not be acceptable in your industry, but there are a lot of businesses out there that are operating without a simple budget. A lot of us got into this industry because we have a passion for food and drink and the providing of service, but we weren't always number one in our class in, the entrepreneurial sense. We got into it because we really enjoyed those aspects of it. We come in at Banner Year and we help fill in any gaps. We really focus on restaurants that have been in business and that have a track record of data and financials that we can help them analyze and really maximize those. We help set profit goals. We help set 3-year, 5-year, and 10-year plans. We help set them up for growth. We really like to work with growth-minded operators and owners who are looking to move from a food truck to the Skyway to a brick and mortar, any one of those kind of combinations, or they're looking to expand their brand into other markets. That's where we really step in. Also, on the other side, we work with a lot of investors and potential investors. So you've got these really smart people who are business-minded, and they're prepared to make a large investment into a restaurant company, but they don't have the industry knowledge, and they don't know exactly what to look for in a winner or a loser in that sense. So we're able to walk them through the process and go through an audit of the business plan and take a look at all of the metrics and advise them on that side too. So we really help restaurant operators with the business skills that they may be lacking, and we help restaurant investors with the restaurant skills that they may be lacking, and we kind of meet somewhere in the middle. And it's commonplace also in our industry for leaders to not have coaching and mentors, which I think is not common in most industries. And so what we really act as our coaches and mentors for our clients.
Excellent.
That's what we do.
Awesome. Now, Becky and I go back, so if my counterpart were here from Jones, we'd say, my name's Rob Stark, I'm from Edward Jones in beautiful downtown Buffalo. And if you haven't checked out Buffalo, check it out. And Becky will also have a shop down there, and we met through a Rotary meeting officially, and so I was excited to bring her here. So, Becky.
Hi everybody, I'm Becky Melvey. I'm a small business owner. I have a shop downtown Buffalo, as Rob said, called Abundant Kitchen. It's a cooking school and kitchen store. So folks come in, we have cooking classes for groups from 8 to 12, 14 people. Tonight we're going to make Thai food. On Tuesday night we're making Cajun. Fresh pasta is one of our #1 cooking classes. I like to say it's the best meal in Buffalo that you're going to have. So there's a cooking school there, and I have a second location in Excelsior on Water Street where you can shop all the kitchen gadgets that your heart desires. All the pots and pans and things you never knew even existed. So 2 different locations. I've been in business for 3 years. Been running my 3-year-long marathon. I trained in Ireland at the Ballymaloe Cookery School. I lived in Ireland on an organic farm and did a chef training program there. Actually bringing people back to Ireland for culinary tours. So if you're into travel and want to see the world, we have a culinary tour leaving in May, and there's a couple more spots available. I've got a bus of 16 ladies and 1 man going to Ireland to cook. We're going to take cooking classes and forage for seaweed and make goat cheese. So adventure is one of my values. What else about me? I work on the business with my husband. He's my business partner. I've got 9 employees, 9 or 10 or 11. I can't keep track. What else? I have a website, abundantkitchen.shop, a Facebook page, an Instagram page. Follow me there. I'm always trying to give value to my customers. I have want to say, pretty good social media following, and that is because I'm constantly on there driving traffic to the site, talking about how to cook and give people little hacks and things that make their lives easier. What else about me? Come to a cooking class and bring all your friends.
And a separate discussion, talk about what, if you have time at the end of this, ask Becky about the renovation to the building that you took over in Buffalo. So that was pretty amazing.
So the building is built in the 1930s. It was a restaurant in the early 2000s that failed, then turned into a purse store, and the restaurant equipment sat in the kitchen and was rained on and rusted and was not going to be passed by the Department of Health. So I looked at the building and said, how can I turn this into a food business and not have to be regulated by the Department of Health? And that was cooking classes. And I had been teaching cooking classes through the community ed, and it made sense that it would be cooking classes there. And yes, we still use the same equipment from the early 2000s. Coca-Cola took off all the rust off the stove.
That's a separate discussion.
Yes.
Science involved or something.
But use what you can find. Use the resources that you can find.
That's right. So Raghavan, I met him also through a Rotary event last summer, and I generally don't like to read, but his accomplishments are pretty amazing. This is, as a food guy, this is pretty exciting. So Raghavan Iyer is named by Epicurious.com as one of the top 100 influencers ever for home cooks in 2017, alongside names like Julia Child and James Beard. Raghavan Iyer is the author of 6 critically acclaimed books and has 3, count them, 1, 2, 3 James Beard Awards. 1 win and 2 finalists, 1 Emmy, 2 IACP, which was formerly the Julia Child Award for Cooking Teacher of the Year, and a Cookbook Award. He's a spokesperson for many international clients as a consultant for innumerable restaurants across the country. He has been featured numerous times in the New York Times and is a frequent guest on the Splendid Table. He leads culinary tours yearly to the Indian subcontinent, and his website is www.raghavanir.com. And it's a privilege. I got to see him do an actual demo, and he makes cooking with curry look so simple. And yet I find it to be pretty complex. So without further ado, Raghavan.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Thanks for the opportunity to come out and talk. I've been in this business for a very long time, and I am probably going on my 37th year in the food business. I do enjoy teaching. I've always said my brand is education. And everything that I have done in my life and in my career has to do with education. Whether I am educating the public or the professional, I feel like that's really what I focused on. And everything that I do, even if the consulting that I do, the businesses that I open for clients, there's always a very strong educational component to it, because I feel that's really how you can sort of convey and parlay what it is that you're trying to do. And coming from a background of Indian food and culture, I feel it's always been, and it still continues to be, one of the most misunderstood cuisines in the Western world. And given the fact that it has been around for 6,000 years, I feel there's a little bit of knowledge when it comes to the depth of what a cuisine like that has to offer. And so as an educator, I always feel like that's always been a challenge over the years. I was fortunate when I worked in restaurants before. I have 2 degrees. One is in chemistry with a minor in physics and math, and one is in hotel restaurant management. I went to Michigan State University. So when I got into the food business, I came to the country really not knowing how to cook. And so I've always said I've learned to cook the Indian way in a foreign land. And when even though I graduated from Michigan State, actually from Mumbai, I first came to, and probably a lot of you probably know this town, I came to Marshall, Minnesota. And coming from Mumbai to Marshall was a big eye-opener. And so this was way back in the early 80s. And I felt, that's really what shaped my thinking and my career in some ways. And I worked in restaurants for a number of years, and I sort of got burnt out in the business because I felt operationally it stymied my creativity. And so I always wanted to teach. I speak 6 languages, and I speak French very fluently, and so I used to teach French for 3 years, actually. And I always wanted to get back into teaching in one capacity or the other. So I thought, how about teaching cooking? Because I got more and more comfortable with it, and so I started teaching Indian cooking when really not very many were doing that. The teaching led to the writing. The writing led to consulting and books and television, and I've always said, my first partnership in the writing world was a partner that I never expected, and to this day I feel like it taught me a lot. And the first book that I wrote was a book I always say that has an oxymoron title. It's Betty Crocker's Indian Home Cooking. And it's a book that is still in print after 20 years, and in the publishing world that is really quite incredible to see. But having had the opportunity to do a book for the brand Betty Crocker and for General Mills was something that they've never done before, and so I don't think they've done anything like that since, because it was truly a project that was off the left field, and so. It really helped me, I think, in forming my career. And now, with all the books that I've authored, the most recent one that I did was, and it's not just Indian cooking that I do. I teach, really, I feel like I'd like to be known as the guy who teaches about flavors and techniques. And so that's really what I focus on. I've written 4 books on Indian cooking. I did 1 book on multi-Asian foods with more of a historical component that was co-written for the Minnesota Historical Society. And that's the one that PBS had commissioned a documentary. And as the host of the documentary, I got the Emmy a couple of years ago. Then the most recent book that I did was a book all about potatoes. It truly got me into the world of potatoes and bringing in the global nature of an ingredient like that. I've always said there are two kinds of people in the world. One who love potato and the others you don't trust. It's one of those ubiquitous tubers, and it's there for a particular reason why it's the fourth largest crop. And I just signed a contract with the publisher of my last 3 books to do my 7th book. And it's a book called The Master of All Curries, 50 Essential Curries from Around the World. And this is sort of a compendium piece to a big book that I authored over 12 years ago called 660 Curries, which was a book which was a very authoritative look into the world of curries from the Indian subcontinent. It was in the top 10 list of the New York Times, National Public Radio, Boston Globe. Publishers Weekly just named it one of the top 5 modern classics. And so that's really what drives me is a sense of, I like to do things that nobody else has done before. And I think, when you think about the world of food and education and the restaurant business, I always like to take a step when I feel nobody, because in a way I can draw the course, I can chart it out. And so I don't have to follow anybody. Even when I write cookbooks, I don't look at other books of that genre because I feel it stymies my thinking. And so now I've focused a lot on consulting for the hospitality end of the business, restaurants in particular. One of my big clients is a company called Bon Appetit Management Company. It's a company that's owned by Compass Group. But Bon Appetit has been a client of mine for the last 16 years, and I've been training their chefs in working with flavors and spices, and I've done over 80 national workshops for them over the years. And I also open Indian concepts for them. And they run cafes in places like Google and Yahoo and lots of private schools like MIT and Case Western and so on. And so I've opened up some Indian concepts for them at some of these accounts, including MIT, which is the most recent one, a couple of years ago. Locally, most recently, I have a concept that I own. I have no operational role. I have no intention of having an operational role in it. And it's a restaurant called Pizza Karma. And it's tender-fired pizzas. Because you think about pizzas and you always wonder, what the hell can you do more with pizzas that has not been done before? And I've always said, what really defines pizzas are the style of cooking those pizzas, whether they're wood-fired, whether they are black, or whether they're coal-fired, like Black Sheep is. It's the medium of cooking it, and I always looked at a medium of cooking that is in existence in 80% of the world, which is a clay-lined oven. And so that's what I focused on. So the tagline for that restaurant is tender-fired pizzas. And nowhere in the menu I use the word Indian, because I feel when you look at a style of cooking breads and meats and vegetables in that oven, which is in 80% of the world, to sit there and pigeonhole it into something that is more than beyond what it is. And so the focus of that is looking at the global nature, just the way I did with potatoes, looking at the global nature of the flavors and the sauces that go on top of that clay-fired dough, which I think is really the beauty of that restaurant. And we've had some great exposure and some great media coverage for the first one. I don't have, as I said, I have no operational or ownership interest in the restaurant. And they just opened a second location in Maple Grove, which is not too far. And they're just currently thinking about a third location in the Skyway in Minneapolis. So that's in a little bit about the food business, and I'm sure we'll talk more.
Yeah,
so.
absolutely.
So I appreciate just the insight, and it's fun hearing all the different stories. And that's the one thing, I don't know about you folks, but I know I watch a lot of food stuff, and I'm always fascinated that food has a story in of itself. And I think, Rick, you kind of said that a little bit about, you go back, it brings you back to Center City, Minnesota, right, as a boy, right? You get a smell or you get a taste, and all of a sudden you're transformed back in time when you were a little boy or a little girl tasting, that whatever it is for that first time, right? So food's always fun. So let's kind of dive into a little bit. So what are I'll just hit the easy question. What are some of the challenges for the restaurant business, right? I think there's a lot of statistics out there that say most restaurants fail. So what are some of those challenges that entrepreneurs and food folks need to be thinking about in their business plan to be successful? And Rick, I'll kind of start with you.
Yeah. Well, I think the dark secret of our industry is that your favorite restaurant is probably a lot closer to closing than you think it is. There are certain economic and certain kind of broken systems that are in place that are making it always more challenging. So what you have to understand as a restaurant operator, your costs are always going up. You're never getting, a price break on this protein or this crop. Prices are always surging, and it's not just the food that you're buying, it's the wine and the beer, and it's your employees. So let's focus on what I feel right now is the biggest challenge that we're facing as an industry is finding good people. And we all know how important people are to a business. It's everything. It is the cultural makeup of your business. It is the experience that your guest has. It really is the heart and soul of what we do. So finding good people is and is going to continue to be a challenge. And when you do find good people, how do you retain them? How do you keep them challenged? How do you keep them growing? And how do you avoid the costly turnover and resources that come with losing staff? So I come from a market in the Minneapolis and St. Paul area where when I was operating restaurants, that's where all of my restaurants were, and now that's where most of my clients are. They're facing down a $15 an hour minimum wage that's being phased in, and they're both cities are currently at different levels right now. But as a lot of restaurant operators are looking at this, they're hoping that they're just going to figure it out through pulling simple levers like price increases and, increased marketing or saving a few dollars here or there. What I find is a challenge is to get these operators to be thinking 3 years, 5 years, 10 years ahead, and to have them building budgets and forecasting around these increased costs. So that's one of the challenges. The other challenge, that's kind of one of the current challenges that we're facing. The other challenge is that the talent pool for existing potential employees is very shallow and it's spread out. There is a proliferation of food service and restaurant openings available to anybody. And what you're seeing from that is that you don't have very many applications when you post any kind of a job. If you do get applicants, 30% of the time they don't even show up for the interview. If you have somebody on your staff who needs to be held accountable and you have to let them go, you may hesitate or feel compromised because you know that as soon as you let them go, they're going to be able to pick up another job that same night. So there's currently a very shallow talent pool. And looking down the road, I think the very concerning part is that the pipeline, especially for kitchen talent, is beginning to dry up. We're seeing decreases in the number of individuals who are going through culinary school programs, who are going through restaurant and hotel management programs. So we've got a few current problems that we're facing, but what I think the real curveball coming down the road is that pipeline is drying up, despite how much programming there is and how much marketing there is to the sexiness and the appeal of our industry and working with it. We're still having difficulty getting people into these careers. So one of the things that I do, and I was talking to Chef Ayer about this before we started, is I volunteer my time with the Hospitality Minnesota Education Foundation, which has a few high school programs. It has about 80 high school programs in Minnesota that is preparing kids with the fundamental knowledge of how to carve out a pathway in our industry. So it's teaching them front of the house skills, back of the house skills, business and finance skills. So there is good work being done in this area, but there are definitely a lot of challenges for everybody out there.
So Becky, you're unique in fact that you have, the kind of the retail side, not just, you're not a sit-down restaurant per se. So what are some of the things that you've experienced with your shops?
Well, I would definitely agree with playing the long game is definitely harder as a business owner to look at the long game and think about that 2, 5, 10-year plan, because I'm thinking about how am I going to pay rent this month and how am I going to make payroll, and so playing the long game with the psychology of my head can be one of my challenges, and I think is for a lot of business owners. Labor, it's only going up and harder to find people to work. I would agree with you 100% about that. But how do you just stay positive?
So, I mean, a lot of it is mindset, right? Because when you're by your shop, and I'm sure, it's a Tuesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and, it's just you can say some funny things to yourself in a private moment.
Got to take care of yourself and
Yep.
make sure you're eating right, exercising, and doing something for yourself, because it can drain on you when you're running your own business, and got to watch out for yourself. And then I got my faith to lean on, and that's when it really kicks in. No. But yeah, retail. So I have a retail business, and yes, that is right now very concerning with the whole China trade war thing. We're wondering what's going to happen with that, because a lot of the products that we get from on our sales floor are from China. So that is something we're watching closely right now. The whole world stage might be changing in the future. Something that keeping a pulse on, that's definitely a challenge. But yeah, retail is all about adding value to people's lives, and I don't think about what am I selling this person, how am I helping this person, and I keep looking back on my mission statement on how I want to help families have wholesome food with convenience, and just going back to that mission statement of creating community around food when I get into those low spots. So that's go back to the mission statement, go back to my community of people that believe in me and want to be part of the Abundant Kitchen community and want to learn. So it's all about serving my community, and that's what I try to focus on all the time when I'm building content, newsletters, events, classes. How am I helping my community?
Yep.
So.
Yep, and you do a great job. I can speak to that because I live there, work there anyway. So Raghavan, you have Becky kind of touched on that, the global aspect of food. So you kind of bring that aspect to us. So globally, what do you see some trends overseas that maybe we're not seeing here in the States yet, or vice versa? How does the global piece play into the restaurant business?
I think the arena has become smaller. When I travel to all these other countries, I think when you live in the U.S., your view can be very myopic in some ways, because you think what you're doing and what you're experiencing is probably nobody else is doing it. But guess what? I mean, if you think you're the first one to do it, somebody else has already beaten you to doing it before. So you do find, you go to these restaurants and you go into these food industries and businesses around the world. They all seem so forward and sophisticated in terms of what it is that they're offering and what it is that they're doing. I could be in a restaurant in Bhutan, and I could be sitting in a high-end Italian restaurant, and you wouldn't realize, if you were not looking out the window, that you are in Bhutan or you are in Nepal. The sophistication and the knowledge and the quality of foods that you're finding everywhere is superior in many ways. And I think that, and it's fun to see that. And it's fun to see that, I don't know about you, but I'm one of those oddities when I go to a different city or a town or a country. I like to go to grocery stores because it really gives you a clue what it is that the people are eating, what are they buying, what are these food products that are available for them, and are these still related to, you know, cooking from scratch ingredients, or are these convenience products that are giving you a clue to what the lifestyle of the average person is. And that's one of the things that you are seeing, fortunately or unfortunately, you're seeing this massive inclusion of convenience products everywhere, and which gives you a clue that in households where everything was always done from scratch, now, because as many people in the household who are living there, a lot of them are working outside the home as well. And so the time for them to cook is much smaller and smaller. And so the reliance on these convenience products are much more so. And as we all know, convenience does not equate to good or healthy, for that matter. And it is about, you know, trying to see how educationally how people in the food business or the restaurant business or the teaching business are able to sort of bring it back to, you know, you see this whole thing of, you know, farm to table. I mean, that's been now beaten to death and then some, you know, and it's now they're always looking for the next story or the next thing to latch onto that would make sense for them. But I think when you all come back to it, it all comes back to what it is that you're feeding your body and your family's bodies. And I think it's a change that is continuing to evolve and shape, I think, the global arena of foods.
Very good. So when you think about, and I'll kind of stick with you, writing I want to kind of shift gears a little bit, cookbooks. What are some of the things people need to be thinking about when it comes time to put pen to paper about, you know, how do you start? Where's your mindset at? What's your process do you go through to write your next book?
I think, you know, I've been fortunate. I was the president of an organization called the International Association of Culinary Professionals, which is 42 years old, and it was founded by Julia Child and Linda Zotter-Casper and Jacques Pepin. And so I got to see, you know, and it shaped my career in many ways, but I also got to see what it really takes. And just as I tell my clients who come to me to consult on a restaurant or a concept, the first thing I always say is don't do it. Don't open that frickin' restaurant because you are going to be miserable. Don't open that cooking school because it is just the worst. Don't get into these businesses because, as Rick had pointed out, it is not sexy as you think it is. And when it comes to cookbooks, I always, you know, when again people come to me and say, "Oh, I want to do a cookbook," and I thought, "Oh, geez, don't." And so even though I do this, and now I've been doing it for a long time, I always say the first thing you have to think about is, why are you doing that book? What is your purpose for that? Is it a vanity piece? Is it something that you feel you're going to make millions of dollars on? Which is totally not true. You know, what is your purpose of writing that book? And I know for a lot of people, and I think Rick and I were talking about this, for a lot of chefs, it is a vanity piece. You know, I'm an author. Even though 98% of these books that are out there by these well-known chefs are not written by those chefs. They're always written by a ghostwriter or somebody else. I'm one of those. I enjoy writing. I love the process of writing, and I write all my books and I do all my research because I like the process of doing it, which is really what I think drives my creativity. Going back to what I said before, I like to do something that nobody has done before. because that's why I don't have to conform to somebody's thinking, because it's my own thinking and it's what it is. And I think with the cookbook, and having also judged cookbooks for the James Beard Awards, and I sit on the foundation board right now on the awards committee, I see enough number of books that I know what, again, just as restaurants, if you think you're the first one to do that restaurant, guess what? Somebody else already done it somewhere before. Same thing with books. You feel like you're the one who's going to do something that is unique and different. Chances are it's not. And so I've been fortunate that I personally went the route of having a literary agent represent my work. And she's one of the top literary agents in the country. She represents big-time, big-known authors, and Barack Obama was her first, his first book was something that she sold. And so she's been with me for all my projects, and so, and that's really the best thing I learned from her about writing the book, was the publishing business is one of the most ass-backwards business. When you're writing a book, you think in your mind you've got this phenomenal idea that, there's going to be a throng of publishers who are going to bid for that. You are sadly mistaken. And I have seen advances for cookbooks for first-time authors anywhere from $0 to maybe $8,000. And a book essentially takes at least 2 years from the time the book is sold to a publisher, and then you write the book, and then the publisher has about a year or so to put it together, and then, and then eventually it is out there for the world to purchase. And you think everybody and their mother is going to be there purchasing the book, and the reality of it is if there's more than 6,000 books that are published a year, what in God's name is a consumer going to assume that out of all of that, they're going to grab your book? And that's really the bottom line, is what drives them. And so oftentimes when you write a book, you think about what it is that hasn't been done before. And so I, to this day, and I hate my agent for that, and she knows it, but she forces me to do it anyway. So every book, every proposal that I write, she has a very arduous process of writing that proposal. The proposal itself could be 100 pages. And you talk about the business end of a restaurant. The business end of writing a book is the business end of it. And part of that proposal is you have to have a strong marketing piece in that book. Who are you to write the book? What makes you the authority? How are you going to sell this book? And how does it stand out from anything else in that little genre that you may be competing against other authors? So you really have to lay out in great detail. And then you have to have an annotated table of contents that actually irons out what each chapter is, you don't actually write the book. I mean, I've always said as a good author, you never write anything until you paid for it. Because then you start the actual process. And so fortunately, the 7th book that I'm working, which is my 4th with this publisher, it's a publisher called Workman Publishing. And they do authoritative books. They do only 4 or less cookbooks under their banner. But they're the ones who did the books like the Silver Palette Cookbook and 1,001 Places to See Before You Die. And so they do big authoritative books. They did the 660 Curries. And so I've done 3. This is the 4th one. But this one actually came, they are the ones who approached me and said, what do you think about doing a compendium piece to the 660 Curries? And think about now the curries around the world. So that topic was already, it was something I was thinking about, and I thought, okay, now that I know, it's just like the potato book. It's a great idea. It was one of the quickest books I ever sold. But when you actually, the publisher says, okay, let's do it, and then you think, oh shit, what did I do? Why did I agree to it? Because all of a sudden, you have to now think about how do you go through the process. Everybody is different when they think about writing a book. And to me, it's all about, I'm the world's biggest procrastinator, and I walk around thinking, people look at me and say, are you doing anything at all? Because you're not doing anything, and so you're always thinking. in my mind, I'm shaping the book in my mind. I'm shaping what it is that I'm looking for. And so to me, it involves a lot of reading and a lot of seeing what restaurants are doing around the country and to see what I'm experiencing in terms of flavors and all of that good stuff. And so, and I start creating, and I actually start cooking, and then I start taking notes, and then I start actually writing. And then I get into I've always said the introduction to my books are always the last thing that I ever do in the book. Because it's, once I get all the recipes done and created and written and tested, I know at that time I know what I really want to say. And then I do the introduction to the book. And so, so it's about a 2-year process. The 660 Curries book took 4 years because it's an 830-page book.
That's 150 curries a year.
660 curries, and a total of 700 recipes. So my tagline was 2 curries a day for, a curry a day for 2 years with time off for holidays. So, but it is not what people think it is, just as, you know, restaurants is not what people think it is. And so even writing cookbooks is not what it is. And so I always say enter it with caution.
Very good. So that's a good segue too. So I'll start with Becky. So as an entrepreneur, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give an aspiring entrepreneur to open up into the food business? What would be that one piece of advice? And at this point too, for time, we're gonna do a lightning round. So
I would say have a mission statement that you can go back to and outline your values, and you're gonna work your ass off all the time.
Yep.
Be ready to work hard.
Yeah, that's for sure. Long hours, right?
Long hours.
Yep. 25-hour days whenever possible. Rick.
Build a budget and seek out a mentor or coach.
So what's the one piece of advice for so you said don't do it.
That's still my
that'd be your, but if somebody forced you to give them any insight, what would be the one piece?
I would say do your homework and do something that nobody has done it before, at least in your mind.
My next question is, what's the one thing about the business that's been most surprising to you? That you thought you knew, but but once you got into it, it was completely different. I'll do popcorn for this one, so whoever's ready to speak to it.
Mine was, I guess, I started my cooking class level of teaching, like what I wanted to teach, way up here, and now I'm down here. I thought people wanted to know, like, really fancy stuff. And they just really want to learn basic how to make tacos, pizza, pasta taste yummier, and how to chop an onion. Like, that's...
Without crying.
Without crying, that's a hot topic. Yep.
Yes. Rick, what do you think? What's the one thing that you thought you knew, but you found out you didn't?
Well, I guess as I sort of spend more time in this industry and I get to know and get insights and data, I think the one thing that I'm just touching on my last comment. The one thing I'm surprised by is the lack of a plan that a lot of these owners and operators do not have in place. And it's sort of surprising to me, but I think it's going to be more surprising to anybody on the outside looking in, because you look at these people and you look at the volume and you look at the number of Instagram followers and it's just sizzling, you know, it looks hot. And it doesn't always translate. I think some of these people and these concepts are successful in spite of themselves, and they're not sustainable. They lack any kind of a financial model that is driven around cost of goods percentages and profit percentages. Their quality of life is probably out of whack. And you know, just again circling back to my earlier piece, they're not doing as well as you think they are. The margins are razor thin. They're getting thinner, and in a lot of these places, there's this lack of a blueprint or a plan, and that is surprising to me.
What about you?
It still surprises me. I always thought to myself that if you do something the first time around, the next time around it's going to be easy. You sell that one cookbook, the next book is going to be easy. You open that one restaurant, the second restaurant is going to be easy, and it's not the case. It still surprises me that how every project and everything is not what you think it's going to be. And I think it still continues to be a challenge. It still continues to be very arduous. And I think it's everything people assume. They look at me and think, oh, this is great that you're in the position. Even though I'm in this position, whatever that is, I feel like it still is a continued process, and it's not easy. So,
Very good.
so it surprises me.
So I'm going to close with my questions with what's the one food, dish, recipe that is a guilty pleasure for each of you? What's that, like that white trash moment that it's midnight and you reach in and you kind of sneak over to the pantry and you pull something out? What's that guilty pleasure?
Well, I don't think it's guilty at all, but well, to this day, I reach for a really good bag of potato chips.
Okay.
I feel like it's one
You
of
like
those.
potatoes a lot.
I do love potatoes a lot, and
Okay.
so, but again, people think it's guilty food, but it's actually, if it's done right, it's very healthy. So.
I'll have to remember that. You're going to have to connect about potato chips.
Yeah.
Becky, what's your guilty
I
pleasure?
crave Chinese food, Thai food, just like stir fry, drunken noodles. I want to eat that every day of my life.
Wisconsin cheese curds.
And they have to squeak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be up there too.
That's right.
Yeah, what do you see as, I guess, the future of the restaurant business, given, the prevalence of things like Uber Eats and technology being added into the industry? What's the future of that look like?
Man, I've got a lot of thoughts on this. How much time do you have? So, to Josh's question, what is the future in regards to technology and the direction things are going? Okay, so there's this whole slew of third-party platforms, and I was one of Bite Squad's first customers. I was really close to the founders and the developers, and I helped them launch that program at one of my concepts. And since then, it's been one after the other. I think at one of my clients' restaurants, they currently have 6 tablets adhered to their wall, taking orders from applications all day long. So there's this definite groundswell, right? It's a very it's a disruptive factor, and my friend and my mentor Alex Roberts, I think, put it better than anybody. For a lot of these companies and a lot of these companies that these restaurants that engage with these companies, you're really chasing fool's gold. The margins don't make any sense. You might squeak by at best with 1 or 2 points of margin if you're costing your plates out correctly when you're using these delivery apps. So you're usually losing there. The consumer is usually losing because they're getting a cheeseburger that's been, that was cooked 45 minutes ago and has been in the backseat of somebody's car for about, 30 minutes on a drive after it got out of the window. And so if you're looking at this as a way to profit, you're probably going to have some challenges if you're a traditional restaurant because of all of your other overhead costs. So I've seen what I think is an interesting trend, and an answer to this is this idea of what I call a ghost kitchen, where you have a business and a menu, a whole concept that's built around the idea of delivery, where you don't have wait staff. It's strictly kitchen staff cooking orders from these from these devices directly, and you're saving on a lot of overhead and labor points and a lot of the other costs that are typically associated with a restaurant. I mean, you could, if you have the proper cooking equipment and the HVAC system, you could cook in a building with no windows and nobody'd ever know that it's the restaurant that's producing this food that's being delivered to these apps. So I've seen that popping up in markets, and I've tinkered around with that business model idea. But I don't see I don't see a clear sort of end to this. I think it's just going to continue to grow, and I think as people look around at their competition and how much business they're doing through these, you're going to have to at some point decide to opt in. I think if you use it strictly as a marketing vehicle, and if you can attach promotional materials, or if you're just using it to get your name out there and you do a really good job of branding and marketing through the packaging and what you're doing, like if it can sell your message really well, I think there's an opportunity there to really capitalize on this. But otherwise, like Alex said, it's kind of chasing fool's gold. I think the system is broken. It's kind of a lose-lose for the restaurant and the consumer at this point, and it's ripe for sort of version 2.0.
To answer your question, I think one of the biggest trends I'm really seeing nationally in particular is pulling away from concepts and restaurants that focus heavy for labor. If you could provide something as a quick service restaurant, consumers are becoming more sophisticated in what they want. They want food that you normally would associate with high quality restaurants, but they want it cheap and they want it fast. And I think it is now becoming very evident that a lot of these high-end sit-down white tablecloth restaurants are not what it is, and I think that's one of the biggest trends that we're seeing.
Anything else from folks? I'll close with the last question if there are no others. What's the one foundational, so we talked about the transformation of the restaurant industry as a whole, farm to table being that concept, but what's the one ingredient people need when they're thinking about talking about sustainability from now and to be around and to be relevant in 20 years, 30 years from now? What do you see that common denominator from different food establishments that they have and they do really well?
Here's what I think. I was just sitting in a restaurant in my neighborhood of Southwest Minneapolis with my wife, and this restaurant has been in a strip mall. It's been there for 20 years, and I think that's incredible. They have been a part of our community and in that space and taking care of their guests who are in our community and employing members of our community for 2 decades. So that's what I define as cool. I don't count Instagram followers and that kind of thing as a sustainable business model. And what I think that they probably have in place is a strong foundation of leadership, a clear vision, tools that everybody from the top to the bottom knows how to use, and again, they probably have a pretty good grasp on the sort of business and financial underpinnings of how to operate a business, not just how to operate a restaurant, but that other piece of it that seems to be missing.
Right.
Yep, get those expenses under control so you can stay in business another day, and have your processes in place was something that was drilled into us when I was in business school to have a process. As a small business owner, you're reactive, not proactive. So come from that space of proactiveness and you're going to be more successful. Agreed.
I think for a business to be, or anybody to be sustainable over a long course of time, I think it boils down to how nimble you are and how able you are to change, because it is constant change, and I think that's what you have to really be good at. It's not as easy as it sounds, but I think it is one of the key pieces of being able to survive for a long time is the ability to change. At the end of the day, I mean, you could have everything right. You could do everything right. You feel like you've got a successful model. You've got your expenses under control. You've got all of that. But at the end of the day, the consumer's mind is a black box. You have no idea what they're thinking about and how they're going to pay with their dollars. And you could close your restaurant. You have everything going right for you. But at the end of the day, you could still close it. doesn't mean that you are a failure as a business owner. It's the fact that you haven't been able to project or think about what that consumer's black box is. And I think that's really the key to it.
Very good, very good. Well, I'll close this out today. I just want to say a couple things, a couple thank yous. So again, we thank School of Marketing and SDK CPAs for sponsoring us today. Thank Rush Creek Inn for the location. I want to thank our panelists, so Rick, Becky, and Raghavan. We appreciate your time and sharing your thoughts and expertise with us today. I'll also take this opportunity to promote our next event. We're going to shift to a Wednesday next month. It'll be March 18th, and that one is going to be on cyber crime. So if you have any questions around how that works or what that's about, you'll want to make sure you join us. So Mike Kennedy is the founder of Astra Cybersecurity, and he was an old United Health guy who was tasked with the idea of trying to make United Health bulletproof to cybercrime. So he has a great story. He's going to share that with us next month. So we look forward to seeing you there. So again, thanks to our panelists for coming, and we thank you all for coming too, and have a great rest of your afternoon.